Welcome to the MoMENtum Lifestyle Podcast, where we interview an inspiring, educational and entertaining guest to help you build confidence, find balance and live a life of impact. We'd like to thank our sponsor today, Be Spunky. Now, Blake, Janoah and myself have been using their Reboot product for well over 6 months now, and it has been life-changing. I found myself recovering faster, having way more energy throughout the day, and honestly feeling just more jacked up as a man. And this is because Reboot is clinically formulated to support healthy male hormone levels, providing stress relief, improved strength and stamina, enhanced drive, and overall well-being. Be Spunky Reboot contains a proprietary blend of 10 natural and organic herbs and active ingredients that are renowned for helping men to enhance physical and cognitive performance, improve stamina, energy and endurance, optimize testosterone levels, support healthy reproductive function, support cardiovascular function, relieve stress, mild anxiety, irritability, relieve tiredness, fatigue, support healthy sleep patterns, and support healthy body weight. So as you can see, it is a must-have product for all men. So head to their website, bespunky.com.au. That's bespunki.com.au, and use the code MoMENtum to receive 10% off all Be Spunky products.
Evan Spargo, Rory Warnock, Janoah Van Kekem, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us, mate. Thanks for inviting us along.
Thanks for being here. It's actually been a while, Janoah Van Kekem, since you've been on podcast. These are the two boys. Oh, no, Rory's been on before as well, actually. This is your first time, Sparks, is it?
Yeah, mate. I'm a virgin when it comes to these podcasts, so great to be here.
Because you are the virgin of the group, we might throw you in the deep end. For those listening, we thought we'd do like a little Q3 check-in. So 3/4 of the way through the year, it's been a big year for everyone. So a little check-in, mainly with some kind of challenge or theme that the troops are experiencing. Obviously, as blokes, at different times, we struggle to communicate our challenges and our vulnerabilities and our needs. Not these boys, though. These boys are experts at that. So we're going to do a little Q3 check-in. Spargs, what has been the biggest challenge or theme for you so far this year, and how are you working through it or have worked through it?
Yeah, thanks, Blake. So this year, I'd say it'd be self-acceptance. That's been the number one theme for me all year. Started at the start of this year, I was probably at my worst mentally. So would have had a bit of depression, anxiety was at its worst, and my self-esteem was shot to bits. And I just struggled to be my true self. I found like I was always struggling to just show up as who I am. I hid my weaknesses, tried to appear perfect, to have it all together. And whenever I made a mistake, I'd lose my shit at myself. My whole world would come down really quickly. Highly anxious in relationships. Self-esteem was based on perception of others and what others thought of me. And my self-talk was just debilitating. And I was in a relationship that probably weren't serving each other. And that made everything worse, as relationships become a mirror for that. And so I got into the depths of despair, probably the worst I've ever been in my life. And what I realized through that period, through gaining support from others, through therapy, through coaches, was self-acceptance. I needed to start with self-acceptance. And so that became the theme of the year. So I went on this journey of self-acceptance. So I used the resources here from MoMENtum, working with therapists, coaches, went down a psilocybin therapy journey, which was extraordinary. That really changed my world. I worked on finding my true voice again and self again. I removed anything or anyone in my life that wasn't serving me or conducive of me being my true self. Spend more time on my own. So I ended a relationship, moved out onto my own, and started shadow work. That was been the biggest game changer for me, because my whole life I've been denying my shadow, avoiding it and thinking that it's not there, when really it was. And when it came up, that's when I really got confronted by myself. And yeah, that put me into a lot of shock. And then the last quarter in particular was around the masculinity, and that's been amazing. So I realized during that period is I lost a lot of my masculinity, or I wasn't my true masculine self. And so that's been another theme underneath the self-acceptance, is to embrace my masculinity along the way and stand in that, which we've been doing here at MoMENtum. And that's led to honestly opening up my heart again through a lot of energetic work. I've been working with an amazing coach, Pixie, who's worked with all of us before, and she's helped me open that up. And I've just become a lot more vulnerable through this shadow work. And especially on social media, I've broken down so many barriers to myself, and that, I've stripped myself bare, naked for the world to see, and I'm standing in it. And that's where I'm at right now. And it's a fucking good place to be in.
It's an interesting question there. I'd love to, for you to go deeper on all. There's two parts. One is around like, what do you mean by losing your masculine? What did that mean for you? But the first part is this always been a theme? Like, did you always know that you struggled with this issue around self-worth? Did it suddenly come about? Like, where did you suddenly have this moment where you're like, oh, fuck, this is actually what my challenge is? Has it always been around, or did something bring it up, or how was that?
Good question. I had an inkling it's always been around, but I just denied it until I went into a relationship where it was confronted in my face. It would, whenever my ex-partner would comment on something, give me some feedback, I'd get so defensive. And I realized that I felt like it was a personal attack on my self-worth and self-esteem. And so I was realizing, why the hell am I getting so triggered? And all my triggers led back to a lack of self-worth, a lack of self-esteem, not thinking I'm enough. And that just kept coming up and coming up. And then I remember sitting in spaces where I'd message someone, a mate, and they wouldn't get back to me in a couple of days. And I'd be sitting there thinking, fuck, what have I done? Are they not my mates anymore? Why do they hate me? And I'm going through all these scenarios, and then they'll come back and say, hey, mate, just been a couple bit busy, da, da, da. And I'm like, oh, thank God. But that's what I'd go through. And I went through that my whole life until it was in this earlier part of the year where I just confronted and said, okay, what the hell's going on with me? I needed to figure out, okay, what these triggers are. And it all went down to a lack of self-worth and a lack of self-acceptance. So that's what was just, I had to take notice of it, especially in a relationship.
Obviously, the relationship was a big one for you, and really, in a positive light, there was obviously plenty of challenges in there. In the positive light, it was probably one of the big catalysts for such a massive year for you. How is it that you lost yourself? I think a few of us can probably resonate with it. And if you were speaking to yourself from this time last year, when you were probably 3 or 4 months in the relationship, if I've got the timeline right, what would you have told yourself?
How I lost myself is when I started to totally neglect my needs and tried to please at every moment. I thought that if I please, the more I please, the more I put the other person first, the more I be submissive, then the more that person will stick around. So I had a very anxious attachment style, which I realized that I grew up from my relationship with my parents, in particular my dad. And so that was really, again, confronting in the relationship. So I just lost who I was. I put everything that wasn't me and, went with it in order to please the other person. And I remember my ex would say to me, you're too serious. I want someone fun. And I was like, shit, I've totally got to let go of who I am in order to be a lovable partner. So that's when I completely just disowned who I was and tried to be something I wasn't. And then that just led to more misalignment, to some real mental health battles. I was just like, I'm not living in alignment. I'm fucking unhappy. And what I would say to myself, like, the number one thing would be, how do you feel with this person? How are you yourself, and how are you not yourself right now? And I think it's highlighting that. Where are you losing yourself? Where are you standing in yourself right now? Where are you trying to please rather than what are you trying to stand true in? And that's the contrast I'd want my old self to see. The contrast between being authentic in my true self versus what I'm trying to project and what I'm trying to please.
When you touched on, I sort of mentioned it in the second before, when you talked about, you lost your natural masculine edge. Potentially your older view of the masculine might have been a little bit different to what you have now. Like, you want to talk us through what you felt you lost? Was some of it maybe that you lost actually some wounded, and now you're looking at, totally redefining what that actually is? Like, talk to that for a bit.
It was absolutely wounded. So like I never felt that I could stand up for myself and I could stand in the man that I am. I always had to be passive. I always had to be that people pleaser. And I realized as a child, there were certain things that happened to me where I just felt powerless. I felt like I couldn't take responsibility for myself. I remember I got bullied when I was younger, trying to stand up for other kids and trying to stand up for myself. And because these bullies got to me, I just thought, well, fuck it. Why should I stand up for myself? It just results in pain. And so there was conditioning that happened throughout childhood where when there was an opportunity for me to take charge, I didn't, because I just wanted to please the other person because I was so afraid of feeling pain and being rejected. So my whole life, I've been creating a lifestyle from avoiding a rejection pretty much. And so that led to all these myriad of problems and not stepping in my masculine. And so I'd say the pattern was you'd meet someone, you'd do everything, you'd all do the right thing, you'd stand in your masculine, you make all the decisions, and as soon as you get comfortable or you open up your heart to that person, it's like, well, shit, I need to please the shit out of them so they don't leave me, so they don't reject me and give me pain. So then I would do everything to be a people pleaser, to be the nice guy in order to keep them, because that's what I thought I needed to do.
And so, and what about now? Like, how do you, like, what are the behaviors now that you see as like, hey, this is me and my healthy masculine. This is what I want to see more of. Like, what does that look like? Because the word masculine is thrown around so much, and I sometimes feel like, what the fuck does it even mean?
Masculine for me is standing true in purpose and self. So knowing who I am authentically and standing in that unapologetically, and knowing my purpose and making that my priority. So when I'm focusing my purpose as a priority and I'm standing in my truth and being authentic and unshakable in that, that is what is embracing masculinity. And when you do stand in that, that becomes your inner compass. And so when you make decisions with other people around, you do what's aligned to your purpose and to yourself, rather than trying to please someone else. And there's also that there's a stronger love for self. There's a stronger standing in that truth where what will come. If it leaves, it leaves. And I'm okay either way. And so when I'm making decisions, is it in alignment with me or is it not? Setting boundaries is a lot easier now because, well, I know my worth now. And I know that if I can't do something, I'll own it and I won't have to put my hand up for it. But if something is for me, I'll go for it. Making decisions, that's a big part of the masculine, is to be the leader. I see myself as a leader. I want to be strong as a leader. So making decisions and standing in that, backing myself. And if I make it, if it's wrong, it's wrong. And it's okay. It doesn't define who I am. So these are little examples that happen. And even on the dating scene, like I'll be unapologetically myself. I'll talk about my shadow side. I'll talk about the times I fucked up, right? The times where it's things I don't like about myself, but I've resolved and all that kind of thing. Whereas before I'd hide that. I'd hide all these weaknesses. Whereas now it's like, I'm going to show you so much of who I am so you can make a decision really quickly whether you want to stay or not.
How's that for a flip? Used to be you put all the front on to like woo them in, and then like a few months later it's like everything falls out.
Exactly.
Yeah, save you some time.
Rory, you wanted to jump in, mate?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, do you think, a slight curveball question here, do you think that you have to go through do you think you had to go through what you went through to then get you to the place you're at now?
100%. I would not have had the lessons I would have had if I didn't go through it. I'm so grateful that I went through that. And all those, whether it's the relationships, it's all the work stuff, it's going into different engagements, and I needed to go through that. And I'm glad I went through that really depth of despair, because you realize how the other extreme as well, how far you can come. I built the necessary skills and tools to get me out of that position. So now ideally I can help other people go through it because I've been there. Whereas I never went through that before. Now I can really have empathy and compassion for someone who's going through it now and show that, hey, there is light at the end of the tunnel. And when you go through it, life is incredible. So it was definitely worth it.
So do you not find that quite a funny understanding that, the more suffering and pain that we actually go through as people, as humans, as men, the more we learn and the better we become?
Definitely. Well, when we go to the gym, like all of us are into the gym, right? All of us athletes, have been athletes. To become the best that you can be, to perform at your best, you have to suffer.
Mm.
Like, look at you, Blake, like how much, and Rory, look at your running and your big races that you do. The suffering that you do that no one sees is extraordinary. But people only see what happens on the outside when you finish the race. But it's the suffering, it's the adversity, it's the injuries, it's the mental blocks that you have that gives you the necessary skills to, when it's that couple of hours a day of that race, you smash it.
I've spoken to Janoah briefly about this before. It's like sometimes when I'm just randomly daydreaming, I'll often think about like, who would I want to go to war with? And it would definitely be those that have put themselves through suffering, like, and choose suffering. And I think you also get a choice as to what suffering looks like. Like, you get to choose the suffering that is the, Rory's 250K race. You get to choose the suffering that really the world doesn't have for us at this stage. Like, the world that we've got is comfort and convenience. And I don't want anyone in my corner who chooses that option, because cool, they can suffer down the track, but we proactively choose suffering in our own form now. So I completely agree with that for sure. Rory Warnock, challenge, theme of the year, how are you moving through it, or how have you moved through it?
Yeah, well, I guess with what Spargo is saying, it kind of leads quite nicely onto my challenge. It's sort of twofold here, but it's more around balance, balance and identity. Understanding what life I want to live and how I can shape that life, and then who the person is that I want to be. And I guess the things that you do in your life, the actions and your behaviors and your habits shape the person that you are. But I guess I'm just at a point now where I'm just trying to, well, when I say now, even over the last few months, trying to understand what that life looks like. We've spoken about before in the past where a lot of circles and groups and, the Gen Pop would just do the usual Thursday, Friday, Saturday drinks, go to the pub, go to the parties, whatever it might be. Don't get me wrong, I like a drink here and there, but, I've gone 3 months with no booze training for this race. And, I'm the odd one out. And feel like I'm lonely. Alan de Botton had the quote, something along the lines of, loneliness is truly a tax we have to pay for complexity of the mind. And I often feel that's very accurate to what I'm going through now, to understand that the deeper the thinker, the more complex personality, the harder the life that's becoming shaped for me is. So I guess around identity, who I am, what life I want to live, and how to manage that balance. Because at the moment, I go all in, and I don't know if that's the life that I want to continue living for the future, or if, I go all in for 2 or 3 months whilst training for a race, then I let my hair down and fill up other cups, things like social life, sleep. But at the moment, it's maybe it's just the period I'm in now, because obviously I fly to Chile tomorrow, so I have had a big 3 months. So my head is, mentally, physically, emotionally drained, to be honest. So I'm looking forward to a couple of days off, and then run through the desert. So yeah, identity and balance.
What is it that you need, and whether you've received it, or what is it that you want when it comes to whether it's an intimate relationship or even friendships? When you're living a life like that, and we've spoken about this before in our Friday fortnightly calls, but what is it that would feel good to you from a friendship or an intimate relationship that supports that lifestyle or those choices?
The word support, to feel supported and to feel safe in my choices, feel safe in my decisions, knowing that I'm doing the right thing and not questioning my choices. I think, life is just built up of the choices that you make. And often if people around me question what I'm doing, then it makes me question what I'm doing. So being around the right people who lift me up and make me feel excited about what I'm doing, and just support me. So, feeling supported, secure, and safe.
What you're doing is, as you mentioned, it's a pretty long and lonely road, and particularly you've said you've gone all in, so potentially some people have fallen away. What's the mental chatter like? Have you had any moments where you're sort of just like dark, like stuff this, nah, like have you gotten out of it? What, because obviously again we'll see the highlights reel and you running and it's looking amazing and all the rest, but I'm sure you had some moments there where it's going, is it worth it? Is it not? How's that been for you?
Generally speaking, I'm fairly disciplined and committed. I'd say 90% of the time, maybe 95% if I'm really pushing it. But then you've always got that 5 to 10% where, it's something I've been looking up a little bit recently and trying to understand is ego depletion, and I just feel like I'm maybe in that current state of the last couple of weeks where I'm just mentally, physically, emotionally drained and I have nothing else to give. So, the internal chatter is usually pretty positive. And I know, maybe I'm not motivated, but I'm committed and disciplined. And I know what the goal is and I know what I need to do to get there. But often if I've given everything with regards to my work, my training, my personal life, I often feel like I have nothing left to give. And, maybe that's the current state I'm in now. And, even when I've had friends call me and text me and I see it come through and I just don't want to reply and I have no energy. But, this is a fairly new feeling and sensation that I'm going through. So, this call and this podcast has probably come at quite an interesting point where, we always feel different depending on what's going on in your life, right? And this is just the current state that I'm in now. So the internal chatter is usually okay, but just when I have too much going on, I just find that overwhelming.
Yeah, Rory. So earlier you mentioned about identity, and I'd love to find out, how did your identity evolve over the years to where you are now, and what impact is that having on you in this current chapter of your life?
Nice question. And it's, I something that made me think of this more recently was when I looked at my Instagram bio, and on my Instagram bio, it says breathwork specialist and ultra marathon runner. And I kind of think, well, yeah, that's what I do, but it's not who I am. And I don't want to just, I don't want that to be what people think is all I do. I'm much more than that. And, to be clear, I'm still trying to work out who I am, and who Rory Warnock is, and if you said, oh, who are you? If I spoke to you on a run or in the pub when I was having a glass of water, I'd say, I'm just a 28-year-old guy making my way through life, trying to help people become happier, healthier, and live a better life, and I'm still trying to work it all out. I don't think that I have an answer to that yet.
It's such an interesting piece, the identity piece, because, and Sparks and I have spoken about this even from a coaching point of view, because if you attach yourself too hard to that can also become detrimental. For example, the ultra marathoner who needs a hip replacement because he's run so, because you can be fucked when that comes through if you've identified too hard as that person as well. And I reckon, in my 18-month capitulation, that was a big part of it as well. Like identifying as the Mr. Fitness guy of 15 years. I didn't know who I was beyond that. And that fucking stings as well. So I guess, I don't know how this sits with you, but the way, even for me now, when I think about identity, is having almost like flexibility and fluidity in who I am now, and knowing that this probably won't be the same person in 12 months' time. And I think respectfully, I wouldn't want this to be the same person in 12 months' time, because I wouldn't have grown and I wouldn't have evolved to the level that I want. So that flexibility and fluidity, not to be boxed too hard. I don't know if that resonates with you or not.
Yeah, no, I'm smiling because the flexibility aspect is what I struggle with. I've done work with therapists around perfectionism and unrelenting standards, and I always want to be in control of everything, and to know that I often can't control things. The classic controllables, right? And I try to be more flexible and try to relax and not sweat the small stuff and just go with the flow. But often I know the things to do but can't do them.
Just so you know, mate, Shani's doing a brilliant job of your website, so you can just let go of control there and just let her do her job. Hey.
Oh man, you honestly, I even said to her on the phone, I was like, I'm a complete control freak, and it's like trauma. So if I'm a complete pain in the arse, I'm gonna just be open and apologize now, because I probably will be a complete see you next Tuesday at some point.
Mate, brilliant. God bless. I love it. Janoah Van Kekem, challenge, theme, and how you've got through it or are getting through it.
Getting through it, mate, slowly but surely. It's been a big, long theme. So I've recognized over the last few years, it's all around wealth, right? And my relationship to it, my ability to manage it, call it in. And so I picked up on pretty clearly on the fact that I have these kind of loops where I sort of get to a level and then can't seem to crack past it. And it was sort of the end of last year. I think I was really like, okay, let's see what the hell's going on here, right? And it's been I've gone down a few different, like, multiple pronged avenues of sort of the energy work with Pixie. I literally, most nights when I go to bed, I found, like, whether it's Eben Pagan or some Japanese Zen around wealth and energy, where I'm listening to podcasts as I'm going to sleep, just talking in different ways. Different people are looking at money, Rich Dad Poor Dad, looking at money and wealth as energy and as concepts. I've even delved into working with gene keys to look at other, like, shadow, like, genetic DNA components, which be impacting how I'm showing up. Looking at now some work around even, like, inner child and deeper levels of self-worth, as to, what is my true level of worth and self-worth in relation to money, because that's what I'm starting to learn is most likely what I'm actually calling it at a subconscious level. Because you can say as many affirmations and do as many vision boards and all that kind of shit as you want. And this is something that I've really started to realize. You see some people, and an example is that I noticed this. I was like, well, how can these people just effortlessly call in money and do these things? Are they smarter than me? Am I missing something? And then you start looking at it, it's like, well, they at a deeper level don't have the same belief of worth around the deservedness for money or whatever it is. And I'm starting to learn, it's like, that's what it is. And so a big highlight for me has been, going through my first 14 to 21 years of life. And that's when obviously the first 14 are probably the most influential in terms of your imprinting of your beliefs. But even sort of up until around 20, and it's been pretty clear. And I look at what I was surrounded by in terms of stories around what wealth means, what wealthy people are. I remember, it stands out when you and I were crossing the road. Remember in front of the Jenny? And so I thought, you always, what you know. And I thought I'd been doing through some work. And this was early this year. So we're a few months in, and we crossed the road, and all these cars were coming across, and we just spent a few hours at the Jenny local cafe sipping lattes and, solving the world's problems. And then we walk across the road, and this big fancy Range Rover stops to let us through. And I was like, who would have thought the Rangie lets us through? Right. And as I said it, like, kind of looked at me, it's like, did you hear what you just said? I was like, I did. And to obviously to talk to that, to explain that, there is a pretty clear belief that the Range Rover is a representation or signal of wealth. And then my view of people that drive Range Rovers are obviously assholes. And so there's an example there of just one little mini belief that I was still just saying without even thinking around, like, well, if I think people to be, a sign of wealth is driving a Range Rover, and if you are that person, you're probably an asshole. Why am I going to allow myself to be an asshole? Because I don't want to be an asshole. And so that was, they're just one little piece of the puzzle in terms of, like, the beliefs that play up. And then I've gone through and done a lot of, I even, like, mum's up at the moment, and I was even having a good conversation with her about, money and growing up. And I was like, in what was your thoughts around money and how were we? She goes, yeah, we were okay, but we were never like, it was always a struggle. There was never like freedom. And I remember even sometimes hearing like stories around, someone buying a new car or going on a holiday, and it'd be like, yeah, of course they could do that. And it's always this like tongue and underlying tone of course they can. It's not us. And that it's, money is hard work. And then there was a lot, in sort of towards the end of my parents' relationship, and they're still good friends now. There was arguments, and often it was around, money was one of the areas that it had come up with as well. And so just picking out some really simple experiences there, that it's like, well, my relationship with money growing up was around that it wasn't easy. The wealth wasn't ever us. It was always other people, sort of a level of victim, and like, poor us, it's always someone else. And then even looking at the people that are rich as, well, they're the arseholes. And so, and this is just the top level of, as we're delving more and more into it. And so there's some fundamental beliefs that I need to look at and start to really reshape. And then, of course, looking at the level of worth, and worth is something that you can't just consciously, look in the mirror and tell yourself you love yourself. Well, yes, that's important, but it's deeper than conscious. And that's where the deeper energy work with someone else guiding me through this inner child stuff is really going to come into play as well. And I'm not through it. I'm still working through it, and now looking at even dissecting parts of my life. So I've even looked at it as in like, it seems to be an energy even now around my business in specifics, because looking at the financials of my business, they've been on a bit of a loop. But I've managed to call in money in other ways randomly, like a payout for a business that I was part of that I left 3 or 4 years ago, suddenly dropped. Like, I've always, other money's come in other ways. So I was like, oh, okay. So each year I've called in a bit more money, but not from my business. So, and this is where I'm looking at it now, like, and I'm not through the bottom of that at all. This is now something I'm looking at as well as to, okay, is it a different energy separated from me and even now business? Because I've done a lot of work on myself and wealth collapses and things like that. So I'm now going to look at, is this a different part to look at? So it's multidimensional.
Can really resonate with the story around wealth that we grew up with, especially in your story. And one thing that you mentioned is around beliefs, and beliefs is a big thing to become aware of. But I see so many people out there, so many men who have an awareness, I have a belief about this. It's almost a badge of honor. I have a belief, this is me, this is my, but what do they do about it? I'd love to find out from you, Jay, how did you go from awareness to shifting that awareness into new intentions, new beliefs, new actions, that kind of thing?
So I've found that the ways that are, first is really starting just to firstly like journal and get it all out on paper and see it in front of you. Like when you start journaling, I know Blake, you've done this as well, and I think you had 1,485 beliefs around. So,
yeah, not just short.
Yeah. And so a big part of it first was like just getting it out there and seeing it, because it's so different having it rattle in your head as to seeing it out on paper. And then the second part, and then it's all well and good. It's okay, great. So now what? And this is something that I cannot do by myself, right? I cannot access and reprogram these beliefs by myself. So it's usually a combination of live coaching with, again, Pixie, to go to those deeper levels and go to some of this past experiences, even sometimes ancestral stuff, which I feel there's a heaviness around looking at my, like, especially once on the family profoundly. It's deep, and then the other part is which I've sort of only touched on in the past a little bit, and now going a lot further into, is working in a child and the reparenting around that area as well, and even looking at, well, what is an energy that I do want to be embodying? So it's like, okay, so these are all the beliefs that I feel are potentially holding me back. What are some constructive beliefs that I want to bring in, and who are there, which people around me in the world do I see that embody them, that I can actually relate to? And this is the thing that I've really noticed. It doesn't quite work to pick some famous person who you don't actually believe. You look at them and go, yeah, but they had this gifted life. Yeah, but they're not like me. So it's now the process of really finding people who are like, who are around and on my level, or have some kind of a similar background that I can really empathize with to a point and go, okay, I can kind of see this now. I can see a level of connection that's enough. Because these vision boards with all these famous and rich people and houses that you don't truly believe, it's not enough. So they're the two that I'm really finding helpful. And then also, interestingly enough, is the gene keys stuff as well, which is, it also ties a bit into shadow work. So gene keys is a combination of astrology. It was stemmed, a guy called Richard Rudd created it, who actually went through human design, and off the back of that, he started looking into and developed what is now gene keys. So it's epigenetics, astrology. It uses some of the Eastern philosophy, spirituality. Like, it's a whole like mix, and it talks of each area of your life. So your purpose, your life's work, relationships, prosperity, and all these areas we can show up in the shadow version or the gift, which is the higher expressed version of how you want to see. And you can see in areas of your life, you're like, oh wow, I can see myself here, where I can get really attached and have this sort of hunger for certain outcomes with my business. And when I'm in that energy, it's a really shadow energy, and that blocks anything coming in. So how can I be aware of, and even just the awareness in itself of when you're like, there I go telling that story that I've written down there I go thinking in this way, there I go reacting, there I go wondering if this person's going to pay me back. All these little things we start becoming aware of, because your reality is the byproduct of your daily based brain habits, right? Not just the one time you're doing the work. It's all the other, the 95% of the subconscious stuff that's playing around. So the increase in awareness of familiarity by looking at all these different areas, I can now start picking up, and I'm like, oh, there I go. Oh wow, this triggers the fuck out of me here. What's in this? And so there's a few different levels there, but a big part of it has had to be getting outside help and guidance with it, and then having people like around me, like Blake, for example, who pick up on things and go, hey dude, you see that over there? I'm like, oh, those mirrors are really helpful as well, because we do our work, we still got our blinkers on.
Sparks mentioned obviously different tools and techniques to help you move through that. And one of the things you mentioned earlier was around kind of expanders. So people who might have embodied what you're looking for, and even evidence to find that it's possible. When it comes to money, what do you notice? And you just literally used the word triggers, I think, just before. What have you noticed over the last 12 months in different environments when people, because we've all got different money blueprints, what are some of the kind of examples that you've noticed, because you're so attuned to it now, of maybe how other people spend money, save money, do money? What are some of those behaviors that have potentially stimulated a thought or an insight into your own limiting beliefs or stories?
One that I've really noticed that's really like triggers me, and which also ties into some shadow, right, is when I see people stingy and tight. That actually, like, it repulses me, right? And what I noticed is like, I thought, this fucking makes me feel sick. And then I was really like sitting with it, and I was like, have I ever been like that? Do I ever think like that? And I'm like, fuck, I do. Oh, like, and that stemmed from some of this like victim energy of like, yeah, but they've got more than me, or yeah, but whatever the fucking story is. And often it stemmed to like, oh, there's some serious poor me going on here. You know what I mean? And that was a really big one for me. Another one is when people like spend and shout things for other people. It's like an envy comes up for me, like huge envy, because I was like, I want to fucking be able to do this. But right now, the story I'm telling myself is I can't. Right? So it's like, okay, can I be generous in other ways? Can I embody this energy in other ways? Does it just have to be about money? What is the generosity piece about? Is it ego and significance and making a point? Like, could I still do that if no one knew about it? Is it genuine being generous? Is it about so there's, as you can see, that I start rolling into it. It's like, there's ego, there's victim. So there's the things that I've even just like, I've noticed around like how I show up, and then the big triggers that play out. And I think the continuation is going to be some deeper shadow as well. I think is going to just sort of playing on the side to really fill into some of those sickening ones, triggers.
Beautiful. Good share. Rory, you got anything you wanted to add to that, mate? Quickly. Look like you're deep in thought.
Yeah, I was just thinking the last point there when you mentioned, when people are able to buy things for other people, for example, and I think, excuse me, and I think with, I get that as well. And I'd love to be able to provide and buy, whatever it is, just little gifts here, then everywhere for friends and family, but I personally, I'm not in a financial place to do that yet. And I think I hold attachment to money with being success and almost, being accepted. And people who have money and have the ability to do that then are, highly regarded in society. And people think that they are more worthy, maybe for no better word or term. So, I'm trying to personally, I guess, let go of that attachment and that story and that narrative that I told myself, but more so understanding that I can do other things for other people. I feel like I can hold space well. Yes, that's not financial. That's not financially going to benefit them, but emotionally it'll benefit them massively. And again, Jay, you're incredible at that. So, trying to shift and reframe, I guess, is my strategy to that.
And also, it's really finding that line because this desire that I have to develop a life of wealth and freedom, so I can do these amazing things, for myself, but also for my family and my loved ones and all the rest, is something that I'm really striving towards, and it's a fucking motivator for me. But also the thing I've got to be really careful to remind myself is like, but what if this is it? Like, can I be okay? Because I have a fucking great life. I live in Byron in a beautiful house with amazing housemates. I mean, this is one of my best mates who lives upstairs. We look after each other. I'm still able to go on holidays and do things. I'm not struggling. Like, life is still amazing. It's really important for me to have this balance. So I think everyone are yes, be determined as fuck, but also it's because I have got caught up in the too much expectation, attachment of what's going to be over there, and not enjoyed the process, the process I've gone through. And it's been really, this last year has been really, really highlighted for me. It's but can you be okay with it? Can you? And to your point, Rory, is what other ways can you embody the energies of the wealthy person, the generosity, whatever that is? And so, yeah, you're right. It's a really important way to look at other ways as well.
One foot in gratitude and one foot in desire is piece that's been said a couple of times by a person that we've been following recently, and I really resonate with that. Yeah, it's big. Rory?
Yeah, I like that. I've not heard that before, but that's good. I'm going to write that down. For me, I often, the act of being present, where I am currently is where I wanted to be a few months ago. So you're where you wanted to be. So enjoy that moment, but still strive. The four of us here, we want to do great things and be great people. So we're going to always have that mentality. But, months ago, I would have loved to be in the position I'm in now, and I'm in that position. So enjoy that. But you can but still, that 1 foot in desire and 1 foot in gratitude is great. That's bang on.
2 feet on the wall now.
Good share, brother. Good share.
We've got time for you, mate. We've got time for you. You're going to have some time to share your story, or we've
got a few minutes. We've got a few minutes. Rory's just got to sneak off about 7 minutes or so. My piece, which I've spoken to all you guys about individually at different points, I guess my theme, which was also very much a challenge at the start of the year, was connection. And I literally spent every single week for the first 6 months, sometimes twice a week, with my coach Pixie, working through connection. And if you look at it on a surface level, it's how the fuck can you possibly spend 6 months every single week working with your coach on it? But when you get down to it, it's mind blowing. And it's still a work in progress for me, which is amazing to think when if I reflect on how much I've moved through this year, how many layers we've all got that are blocking deeper connection, that are influencing friendships, relationships, intimate partners, everything. Just all of us are carrying around so much stuff that's impacting all friendships and relationships. And really, it stemmed from a very interesting last couple of years. And I think for a lot of people, they've probably gone through breakups, depending on, which the choices that they might have made over the last couple of years, and what's happening in the world has definitely divided people, but also potentially in a more positive note, help people get clarity on, who they want to be and what they kind of want to take with themselves in, forward from a friendship point of view. And yeah, that was a big one for me. And, I guess my big piece is, if there's one regret that I have from last year, it would be the way that I went about those, in terms of the dissolving of certain friendships and the dynamic shifting. And it wasn't done that very well, or it wasn't done very well. And that was really just my wounded, inner child looking for acceptance, approval, and, fearing rejection and abandonment, that really, was shouting really loudly over a 12-month period. And that's where I had to start at the start of this year when I started working with Pixie. And I actually had to start with social media, because I was projecting really hard out on social media, which again was just my little inner child projecting, his feelings of rejection and abandonment. And, I really would have loved to have allowed the dissolving of certain friendships and allowed the dynamics of certain friendships to transition with grace and humility. But instead, it was done, with resentment, bitterness, and just, a lot of energy that I'm not proud of. But again, like all of us, it became the catalyst for the work that I've done this year.
I always love having conversations when you're like, fuck, I used to think this. And when, what would be like, say, to pull your top one or two, like, wow, like, blinker off moments the last 12 months in terms of how you were blocking connection? Maybe things that you were like almost sure you were doing well, that when you went into it, you're like, actually, I'm not. And this is such a big one. We're so self-assured. It's like, no, I'm good at this. I got this covered. And then you start seeing more for what it is. Like, what were a couple of standouts for you that you're like, oh, fuck?
Well, I think the first one, and the one that blocks connection for everyone, was judgment. And for me, judgment really has been a protective mechanism. Not really feeling probably safe and secure in the world, and not really feeling safe and secure in myself. Judgment would block, from that kind of hypervigilant, anxious energy. Judgment would block my ability to connect with people, as opposed to just coming in with clean energy and just having discernment to make a call. Then I already came with the blinkers on and with the block on. And that was one of the first things Pixie and I worked through at the start of the year was, can you put judgment aside and can you come in with discernment? Because discernment's a much healthier place of like, is this person 100% for you? Cool. They're not. That's okay. You can still love them and they can still be at arm's length, or they can be, go off into the world. But instead of coming in from that kind of harsh judgment, can you just come in from discernment? And the big piece for me, was healing a lot of what's happened over the last couple of years in particular, but also getting clearer on what I want from friendships. And then, bringing those two things together has been, a really significant part for me this year.
And so what does it look like now? Like moving forward, what do you reckon? You're 70%? Like what do you want from relationships? Where are you?
Yeah, I'd say it's 70%. I even look at, Rory and Spargo as perfect examples. Like we've bonded really nicely over the last 6 months, and it's, those are the type of friendships I want. And, with all respect, I will call him out on this because I still think it's shit form, albeit I've had to do a lot of work around it. My former best friend of 21 years sent me a text message to say that we couldn't be friends anymore. And for me, that's not what I want. And, with all respect, backbone and spine has never been, some of his stronger characteristics, but I want people in my life who can show up with backbone, who can show up with spine, who can voice what's going on, who can have emotional intelligence and have real conversations, strong conversations, deep conversations if necessary. And that for me is what I really want in my inner circle. You know, something like that might be okay in a, you know, in my kind of wider, broader friendship group. But when it comes to what I really want in my inner circle, those type of traits aren't what I want. And, you know, coming back to discernment, that was a really big piece for me at the start of the year of like, you know, put everyone aside. What are the like characteristics and traits that you want in your inner circle? Well, you know, I don't want judgment. I don't want, you know, conversations that are done via text message because you've got no spine to have conversation. I want a tight group who have got voice, who have got emotional intelligence, who have got depth, who will call you on your shit. And that for me creates trust and safety. And for someone who, you know, has probably struggled with trust and safety in the past, those are some of the traits that I really want in my inner circle. So that's become clearer and clearer over the last 12 months for me, you know, off the back of a pretty rough couple of years when it comes to friendships.
You know, going through the shadow work, and in particular in the tribe group that you run, Blake, there's one question that stood out, and I listened to everyone's answers, and the one question was, who are you holding on to? And you talked about right at the start, allowing yourself to end friendships or connections or whatever with grace and humility. And I feel as though this is something a lot of people struggle with because we become attached thinking we should be connected forever, right? So what does allowing grace and humility look like for you?
The first thing that comes to mind for me is people come into your life, and a few people have said this obviously in the tribe group, but it really has landed for me for a season, for a reason, or for a lifetime. And when I got my head around that, that was really valuable because I held on to everyone as if they were going to be a lifetime. Do you know what I mean? And there's probably going to be 4 or 5 people that you do take for a lifetime, and there's going to be the majority that you don't. So that was a really big piece for me. And, you know, in order to kind of move through and transition and dissolve friendships in a healthy way, as we said, with grace and humility, it's around not having an attachment to what it looks like. You know, like all 4 of us are big on growth, which means people are going to come and go, because who I was 2 years ago and the people that resonated with me then, you know, and what's happened over the last 2 years means that I'm not going to resonate necessarily now as the type of person that I am. And I think you really, in this space, in our space of growth and personal development, you probably need to have even more understanding of how to transition friendships because you do grow than someone who might stay in the same town with the same thoughts and the same friendship group for 20 years. So it does come part and parcel. And, you know, I think all of us have seen it. I've seen it through Tribe. I've seen it through MoMENtum. I've seen it through Limitless. People, you know, it's one of their biggest challenges of like, how do I navigate this friendship that doesn't serve me anymore? And, you know, that attachment bit is a really significant piece. So it's something that I've got better at. And I think, you know, coming back to the wounded bit is I look at some of those friendships and I know that they don't necessarily serve me anymore as well, not from a bad place, just that we're on different pages, but still the wounded little boys like holding on tight. So it's been a process, and one, you know, as Janoah kind of pointed, it's one that I'm still going through. Boys, brilliant insight into what's been going on. And as I said right at the start, I think it's super valuable to have open dialogue around our own struggles, and common theme amongst all 4 of us, which I think is super valuable for everyone listening, is that we're still going through it. You know, it's easy to kind of be vulnerable, quote unquote, vulnerable when you've come out the other side of it and you've mastered it. But there's a different vulnerability when you're still in it and you're still working through it. And I think, you know, that's the most important message that we can deliver, is that, you know, we haven't got all our shit together. We're still a work in progress. We're always a work in progress. And, you know, if we can kind of voice that, connect through that and support each other with that as well, that's super valuable. Thanks for jumping on.
Thanks, boys.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in this week. As always, if you enjoyed listening, please leave a review, give us a shout out across socials, or share with a friend so that we can continue to share these incredible conversations with more and more people.